Beyond what we already know about interpersonal coordination, I think there is a very interesting ground to dig in, trying to find out how synergies are formed. So the proposal for this video is how to dig deep on interpersonal synergies in sports. When we watch team sports performance, when we watch rugby players passing the ball to each other, or futsal, indoor soccer players passing the ball, or even basketball passing the ball to a teammate, one question is, are they really coordinated to each other? Well, I think we can assume yes, they are coordinated to each other, because most of the times the ball can go from the ball carrier to the receiver with success. So the main question is, it is not if they are coordinated or not, is assuming that they are coordinated, but we need to know how they are coordinated. So in the last decades, we were blessed by the technological improvements. We gave us the possibility to capture positional data from the performance field with reasonable accuracy, and with a frequency also very nice, about 10 frames until 30 frames per second. We have GPS that players can carry on. Also, we have radio frequency devices, and we have video cameras that allow us to capture not only the player's positional data, but also the ball positional data. However, if we don't have careful in analyzing these data, this positional data can become a curse, as I can show you. This illustrated on this graphic here. When I try to plot the trajectories of the 11 players of one team on a single match of football, we saw this kind of spaghetti that it is completely unreadable, and we cannot understand and cannot capture any pattern from these. However, one very interesting question that we can capture from this analysis is this: what variables contribute to interpersonal synergies in collective sport? So this is our main question when we have access to the incredible amount of data series. The first question is what variables we need to focus on to trying to answer our research problem. So my first research on interpersonal coordination, on interpersonal synergies, was based on this task of 2 versus 1 situation in rugby union. We have a ball carrier, they need to coordinate with the support player. In a certain time and space, he will pass the ball to that man, catch the ball while running, and score a beautiful try. Okay, so what we have here is a ball carrier, we have a support player, and the performance goal is to pass the ball for this receiver, catch the ball while running. For that happens, they need to maintain a certain relative position, which can be characterized by this angle here. So the performance goal of these two players here is to stabilize the interpersonal angle until the moment of the pass. But how can they do this? How do the players regulate that angle? In other words, what are the task-relevant elements that might contribute to the angle performance? So we know that both attackers run towards the try line. They need to regulate interpersonal positions. They need to keep a desirable relative position, which means that they need to manage the running line velocities. So the velocities are the task-relevant elements. So what do we have so far on this research study? We have a performance variable, which is the interpersonal angle in the moment of the pass, and we have the running line velocities of each one of the players that will adjust to each other in order to stabilize the angle on this moment. So we just need to prove that we have a synergy here. To do this, again, we will use the uncontrolled manifold concept that I already present in my previous video, developed by and created by Schoner and Scholz in a paper in 1999. And the hypothesis is for these research studies, the control over dyadic behavior is on the players' interpersonal angles, where the player's velocity should be left free. We ran the UCM with the aim of, well, let's see if we can quantify interpersonal synergies in rugby union, and the first data set that the first results said yes, we can quantify interpersonal synergies based on players' velocity, aiming to stabilize the interpersonal angle. We identified that for 19 out of 55 trials, close to 34%, we find out synergies. Well, the remaining 66%, probably the players will form also interpersonal synergies, but based on different variables. However, the most important thing that we capture from this first study was a limitation of the UCM. And that limitation was the dependency of the calculus based on a reference value. We said when we calculated the UCM for this study in 2 versus 1 situation in rugby that the angle value in the moment of the pass, all the players' behavior were adjusted for that angle. So one question on that time emerged was, what if, imagine that we have a interpersonal angle in the moment of pass that was 45 degrees. What if the players do not stabilize for 45 degrees, but stabilize, for instance, for 50 degrees or for 35 degrees? We do not know. But we have another data set of positional data, this time on badminton. And we try to analyze and solve this limitation, or try to overcome this limitation of the UCM. So again, we need to find out what is the performance variable. And when you watch a badminton game, you saw that the players aim to, both players in a die, try to maintain a certain interpersonal distance, avoiding an attack to the middle of them. So it seems that the interpersonal distance seems very important because the players need to fill the court. Well, to adjust the positions, again, we will use the players' velocities. Again, and based also in the knowledge that we already had from the rugby union study, we said the player's velocity could be very important in order to stabilize the interpersonal distance. Again, we used uncontrolled manifolds, and now we change a little bit our hypothesis when we state that the dyadic behavior is on the player's interpersonal distance, and again, the player's velocities should be left free. In other words, players adjust the velocity freely in order to stabilize the interpersonal distance among them. So, and the results point to these. In the 4 doubles under analysis, 4 dyads under analysis on 2 different matches, we saw that we have 50, 40, 40, and 32% of synergies. Again, synergies were based on these variables, interpersonal distance and player's velocity. However, on this study, we move on. We do not use only a single reference value, but we choose a set of values. For instance, each one of these dots here represent a synergy. Synergies for the dyad 1 or double 1, double 2, 3, and 4. And we can see that there is a range of values of interpersonal distance that could lead the players to form synergies. For instance, on this rally here, the players form the synergy for 1.2 of interpersonal distance, whereas here they form a synergy, so the players' velocity adjusts to each other to stabilize the interpersonal distance close to 3 meters of interpersonal distance. And the same is true for the other 3 doubles. So it seems that the reference value, it is not a single reference value, but players can adjust and form synergies for a range of values. Well, we identify synergies on 50% of, approximately 50% of the rallies. Good, we are very happy. We also find out that it is not a specific value of performance goal, but can be a range. Good, but what about the other 50? And this is our major concern now. Well, we assume something based on the principle of abundancy, that all the degrees of freedom, all the possibilities of action contribute to synergies formation. There is always synergy formation. As long as players go to the pitch, go to the field, they need to cooperate with each other, need to coordinate with each other, there is always synergies. The thing is, or the question is, how are those synergies formed? And that's what we are trying to analyze and studying at this moment. For instance, let's go back to the badminton studies. When we have a player on the field, he can run on the horizontal plane of movement, captured by the axis movement. But they can also move on the vertical plane of movement, characterized by the Y movement. And usually players are free to run wherever they want in order to maintain interpersonal distance, to avoid an attack to the middle or an attack and the success of the opponent players. So what we have here, again, the interpersonal distance, indeed, it seems very important. It is a performance goal. They need to maintain that distance among them. But how they will manage this interpersonal distance, probably it is not only based on velocities. Can be, for instance, in the coordinates in the horizontal and the vertical plane of movement for player 1 and for player 2, but also with the velocities, how these coordinates change on time. And also by as we analyzed in our previous studies, also in the velocity of player 1 and player 2. So now we have a set. We don't have only 2 task-relevant elements, but we have a set of task-relevant elements that will contribute differently to stabilize the interpersonal distance. And our results point this way. For double 1, diode 1, we have the task-relevant elements of the player 1 and the task-relevant elements of player 2. And we hope they will adjust to each other to stabilize the interpersonal distance. This analysis, it was, I think, for 36 rallies. As we can see here, it's on 25 out of 36 rallies. The player 2 adjusts his movements on the horizontal plane of movement with the vertical plane of movement of player 1 to stabilize the interpersonal distance. Whereas in other 25, also the horizontal plane of movement of player 1 adjusts to vertical plane of movement of player 2 to stabilize the interpersonal distance. So we have 25 synergies here, 25 here, 25, 24. And with this matrix, we can see, a pattern that may characterize the behavior, the interpersonal synergies of these diodes on these rallies, on this match. But an interesting issue, what about the opponents, the guys who are in the other side of the net? A pattern a little bit different, which makes us wonder that probably these kind of patterns of synergies formation are quite specific for doubles and for matches. But this requires a further research to answer this question. So, interpersonal, this study, one first thing that we can conclude is interpersonal coordination is always supported on synergies formation. The control over dyadic behavior is on the performance goal, where the task-relevant element should be left free in a certain way to stabilize the performance goal. And now, that is a tricky question. Synergies can be good or bad, which means synergy always contributes to performance, or in a certain way, synergies may not be so good for performance. We do not know, and this is an issue for further research, trying to link synergies formation with performance indicators. But we do an exploratory study in interpersonal synergies in football. We considered that defensive tactical strategy, each similar to badminton, is to keep a certain interpersonal distance between defenders. Okay, they need to fill the space again to avoid the attackers explore passing opportunities around here. So we assume that we have 3 types of synergies on a line: synergy 1, 2, and 3. This is positional data, real positional data that you capture. So we have diode 1 formed by this player and this one, diode 2 and diode 3. And now I will show you 2 different videos, interesting videos. Take a look at this red trajectory, which is the ball trajectory. Here we have diode 3, diode 2 and diode 1. As you can saw by the UCM values, all above 1 means that we have here 3 different synergies, but we do have synergies. The most interesting part of this video is that the ball never crosses the defensive line. Never. So as we have synergies built on this defensive line, the ball never crosses this defensive line. Interesting, when we saw the other video, again with the same diodes, the same defensive line, but diode 1, which is this player and this player, have an UCM value below 1, which means there is no synergy formation here. And curiously, it is the only way that the ball, the attackers who carry the ball, find out a way to cross the defensive line. Okay, it seems that if we don't have a synergies formation, in other words, if these two players don't work as a single entity, there is some kind of a vulnerability here. The attackers can perceive these and put the ball on the other side of in this side of the field. Okay, the first conclusion that we can extract from this study is that we cannot draw any conclusion from this exploratory study. There is very, very few data. It was data that we collect just trying to explore this linkage, this potential linkage between synergies formation and performance indicators. Also, what is the relation, and this is an issue for further research, what is the relation between interpersonal synergies formation and dyadic collective performance? However, we have some limitations on the UCM. First, the dependency of the reference value remains. Even if we do as we do in the first study with badminton, that we use several values of interpersonal distance as a performance goal, the calculus of the UCM still remains highly dependent of the reference value. Second, UCM cannot capture the fluctuations, the dynamics on synergies formation during the course of an action. There is a single value. At the end we know, okay, we have an UCM above 1 or below 1, but we do not know how this UCM value change, for instance, during a rally in badminton. Issues for further research. Is there a pattern for synergies formation? For instance, the pattern that I show you on those metrics with badminton doubles, is this a pattern that repeats on several matches or was quite specific for that match? Perhaps a longitudinal study with the same diet, with the same players, trying to analyze if there is a synergies formation, a pattern for synergies formation along several matches. It will be a nice issue for further research. So there is an unexplored linkage between synergies formation and performance indicators, something that I'm struggling to do and aiming to do in the next years to see if we have good synergies or bad synergies, and how synergies evolve during the course of an action. That dynamics that I talk about. We already tried to these, but we are not succeed yet. And thank you for watching this video.